You're listening to the South and Sideways podcast on the Urban Sentinel channel. I am your host, the Urban Sentinel. This is podcast episode 11, Follow the Money. Now let's get into it. So in this podcast, I'm going to outline some commonly presented information about the wealth agenda of the globalists. And we start with the false premise of greed. Now, conventional conspiracy theory is that the globalists have a depopulation agenda in reducing the human population to a minimum needs with regards to their actual plan. Of course, obviously, it does not include reducing their population. The remaining people will naturally fall into two types, value and no value. And then there are three categories that run between those two, compliant, non-compliant, and threat. Now, I'll give you just a few potential examples of this. A survivor that's desperate for food, medical needs, and safe shelter, but has no tangible skills is no value, but compliant because they are willing to cooperate, listen to, and obey those that have the things that they need. And then they can be placed into general labor in exchange for those needs being met. Basically a modern day serf, as it were. A person with, let's say, engineering knowledge is a value, but if they refuse to leave their family to go work on some dangerous structural project, then they are non-compliant. So again, they have a value, but they're non-compliant. They're not cooperating. And then the individual that has maintained up to that point a level of self-sufficiency in their life and isn't directly in need of anything, meaning they're not coming running to, ask for food, water, help, or anything else, that even though the globalist agenda may provide these things, they're not necessarily willing to accept it, and they could just simply walk off and go back to where they were. Whether or not that individual is known to have some type of tangible skill, something of value, their distrust or their disdain for the globalist puts them into the threat category. So again, you can have someone who is compliant but has no real value, and you could have someone who's non-compliant but does have a value. But when you have the person that's considered a threat, regardless of which category that they fall into, they're a threat. They by themselves would be dealt with in a specific manner, depending upon the situation. Now, each classification can be determined, and a system of compartmentalization would be involved. So effectively removing the threats, monitoring the value non-compliant just to keep an eye on them, see what's going on, and controlling all of the value and no value compliant, because there will be people that have some type of valuable skill that are completely compliant. They thoroughly understand that they're getting effectively into a deal with the devil, but it's better than what they've been surviving through up to that point. And everything will be handled accordingly to a predetermined plan depending upon what the actual action is. Now, the next thing that you want to consider, it's the survival paradox. The elite possess bunkers. We've seen plenty of shows, different videos where, you'll have rich and famous people giving you the tour of their brand new survival bunker that's either built under their house or built specifically purposed in an area. And a lot of that also revolves around the life extension technologies that are going on, not just in the biomedical area, but simply put, they can afford to go to 5, 6, 7 different specialists to examine, treat, and take care of any slight possible hiccup in their health regimen. Even a normal person that does have health care, usually you only go to the doctors for that once a year checkup, or when that twinge in your shoulder or that, weird feeling in your chest won't go away after 2, 3, 4 weeks, then you might decide to go and get looked at. But they have the ability, the financial capability of pretty much having anything and everything that shows up as even a slight abnormality looked into and taken care of. This effectively will inoculate them from any potential pathogenic spread or effects that may go on, because they'll have the early warning, as it were, within the medical region, and they'll have the access to certain things before things get out of control. This again lines up with the above classifications. They'll have a functional staff for their survival shelter, the minimum number of people needed to keep them comfortable and keep them to a certain extent living the lifestyle they're accustomed to. Now, it's not saying that they're going to be sitting around having grapes being fed to them like you see in the images of ancient Rome, but it is to say that if they've been accustomed to the last 5, 10, 25 years of having, people clean up literally everything after them, people provide for their security, people maintain their lifestyle for them, and all they have to do is simply open their eyes in the morning and everything gets done, they're still going to want to have that certain level of comfort. They, again, may reduce staff. They may have a surface staff that you visibly see of 20, 30, 40 people. They might reduce that down to a minimum of 8 to 10 just to keep things going. They may start roughing it or glamping, as it were, in their survival shelter, doing a few things themselves, getting hands-on, but they will not under any condition begin to be isolated. They're not going to go it on their own, because it's quite easy to fall into that life of comfort and stay that way for years and years and years, and then try to go back to what you were doing beforehand, making it through the grind day in and day out. Now, with that, you have to think about everything that's going to be going on outside or above on the surface in regards to the bunkers and the population where people have been starving, injured, or just simply traumatized. Life will be easier to control others if you offer them the safety and a chance at a better life, which pretty much sounds like the premise of a good half dozen or so sci-fi movies that have been made just over the last 10 years. It's always that level that they hold something that other people were used to or knew about, but now they control it. And so that gives them that automatic advantage of, you do for me and I will provide for you. And effectively, it's similar to a neo-feudalistic society where the new rulers, the new landlords, just simply aren't people that have some money. They now have a larger level of control. Which brings us into the ultimate question. Why is the emphasis on wealth accumulation of billions of dollars, the paper money, the fiat currency, such a big thing in our society? Now, part of it is what I would consider to be a logical flaw. Money, no matter what currency, no matter what country, no matter what you assign to it, is worthless when the world is destroyed or becomes fully automated across a wide range of industries. It won't be spent on salaries if robots are performing all the tasks, and the surviving populace has a limited value because there is no more need to go for higher education. There is no more need to learn a tangible, certifiable skill. And basically the people that have control are living in an environment that insulates them from having to even be concerned about that. Now, when they say follow the money, and it is a narrative of misdirection to a certain extent, because it doesn't specifically lead you back to one controlling hand that's attached to the elusive man behind the curtain. And the ultra wealthy, they're not chasing money. Money equals currency. They're using the money as a fuel to move them along to acquire true wealth, and that equals control before the collapse occurs. Because once you have a systemic collapse, and automation and everything else is controlling the majority of the labor, whether it be the intellectual labor, the actual thought process, or the physical labor through robotics. Whatever the financial score is, whatever's in their bank accounts, that the amount of cash that they have, it'll become obsolete. It's not going to be a case of the world ends and you have 24 Scrooge McDucks diving around into piles of gold and, rubbing themselves with cash. That's not an actual thing that's going to happen. They are requiring the money to buy, build, create, and partner up with the new infrastructure that still needs to be built currently by people like you and I. So we still have to get paid. We still have to get a salary. Once everything is done and they no longer need that, then you'll find that switch gets flipped over to new waves of automation, new waves of AI and AGI, controlling everything, leaving effectively all the people that were in some way, shape, or form part of the building, creating process off to the sidelines. The ribbon cutting happens and then that's it. We don't need you anymore. The philosophical distinction between money and wealth sometimes is confusing, and it to one extent can be seen as almost interchangeable, but I'll give you just a few defining terms so we stay on the same page. Money is currency. It's a measure of value, a medium of exchange, a paper receipt or a digital entry. It's a score on the board. Now, in a post-apocalyptic scenario, money is worthless. It's the last thing that the elite needs after the system fails. Wealth is capital. That is the accumulation of scarce resources, energy, communication, infrastructure. This includes land, water, the essential patents for ideas and devices, the technical intelligence, and the personnel necessary to properly utilize it. Wealth is a survival and control measure. The agenda requires the elite to convert their money into wealth now, in the present time, by buying land, building bunkers, developing new technology, implementing new government policies before the currency fails. So, with that, why does the focus on money persist? Plain and simple, it's operational inertia. The ultra-wealth generating systems, the banks, the investment firms, they are designed to maximize profit. It does not matter how many people work in a firm for a Wall Street business. It could be 100 people, 1,000 people, it can be one person. The entire motive of that business is the accumulation of money. It's their default operational status. It's the self-perpetuating mandate. That's all that it does, nothing else. That's what it's designed to do. Now, the public perception, which is part of the distraction, focuses on the greed and the billionaires, and it's relatable, it's tangible. They're the easy villains that you can look at, and that prevents us, the general public, from looking deeper at the structural and the technological mechanisms used to control us and the true source of power. Now, with that, the acquisition tool, money is still the universal. It's still the most efficient tool for acquiring the non-monetary assets, the land, the vital resources, the political influence, the commercial assets, all within the current system as it is right now functioning. In this, there's a network of control, a false fronts and hierarchy tiers that are sort of presented, and we see it all the time, and sometimes you kind of get a glimpse behind or between the cracks, but it usually gets blurred out and something else pops up to distract you later on. In the controlling hierarchy, it is the financial control, the actual making and moving the money around. Within that, you've got just several groups. I'm going to focus on briefly 3 groups that most people have heard the names of. So these big 3 groups are called asset managers, and they do exactly that. They manage assets on a high level. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. These firms hold the largest interconnected voting blocks in nearly all major public companies. As an example, they own significant stakes in 2 competing sectors, Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola. Now, we all know Pepsi and Coke, they're both basically soda producers, manufacturers, but those individual companies own dozens of other companies under their name, dozens of other products under their name. And effectively speaking, they are commercial rivals, but yet these asset managers own stake and controlling factors in both. So regardless of how either company does, it still gives them the advantage because they can benefit from both companies and the influence and the resource control, the water usage, the processing, the distribution, all across the industry. They have an effect on it. The list of actual companies that are effectively owned by other companies that own other companies is almost unfathomable. The total number of companies that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street alone are significant in their controlling shares, or they have people on the boards of dozens of other companies that are also under their control. They can effectively burn the candle at both ends when they own the matches, the company that makes the wick, and they have access to the wax production. So they have total control over something that you would think is uniquely and solely that one thing, but they have control over multiple aspects of it. So every investment does become a win-win because, again, if a company fails, they're able to offset the losses by the policies that the tax codes that the Congress put in place. So they can take losses in the hundreds of millions of dollars and then segue that into gains of billions of dollars by divesting into other areas. They can basically move losses from one score sheet into a gain on another score sheet to put into several other different companies. They may even own companies or control companies that are basically involved and get hired to liquidate other companies. So they're paying themselves to go and remove or eliminate or break up another company that they also control. Now, there's always a figurehead or a front man in this general dynamic. It's the way we operate. It's much easier to have a boogeyman that you can see, a shadow that you can point at, that figure that goes, oh yeah, it's that guy there. Now, if you want to talk public faces, right off the top, I'll give you three: Peter Thiel, Warren Buffett, Elon Musk. Now, they provide a visual poster and a scripted narrative that is effectively handed out to us. It's been tossed out over and over and over again. With that, there's also the hidden wealth, the sovereign wealth funds and the family offices and empires that are also involved, but because they go back so far or they're so widespread, they're not as readily known. But as an example, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal of Saudi Arabia, he has an estimated 20 to 25% controlling stake in Berkshire Hathaway and Citigroup. And then he also has other major shares in Apple, Twitter, or X, Lyft, and at least 2 major hotels. Even the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, has just promised to invest $600 billion, think about that, $600 billion to $1 trillion into the United States for artificial intelligence infrastructure with data centers, defense, and energy, as well as other key sectors. Now, sure, that will give and create jobs here in America for Americans. It will create a certain level of localized and state tax revenue. And in exchange, he gets a few F-35 fighter jets and some other bonus perks. But they will have control behind the curtain for much of what goes on in America through those investments, through those companies that are going to be coming in, through those partnerships that they're going to make with the existing companies. And it's those investor groups that acquire the significant stake in the same companies, and then they leverage it with the front man navigating the public markets. They're the face that you see, they're the person that you hate. Meanwhile, everything else remains vague and barely visible behind the scenes. It's those shell companies that you don't think are involved, and those offshore trusts that you don't realize are taking the money, siphoning it off before it gets dispersed amongst everyone else. Now, there's an interlocking set of directorates. It's the human control. And with that, that's where more people start to realize how deep and how far things go. So you have boards, and the shared boards that many of these companies have, individuals are sitting on multiple corporate boards. So you may have a BlackRock executive on an executive board that oversees lobby groups that spend their time in DC talking with Congress. And it becomes a revolving door. The movement of high-level government officials from the Treasury, Defense Department, from the CIA, they then retire and segue into corporate boards working for the banks, defense contractors, and other NGOs because they have the inside contacts, they know the inside way certain things get done, and they can open up doors and move things along, so it's to the benefit. And then you have influential policy groups such as the World Economic Forum or the Council on Foreign Relations. They create a level of non-transparent, a link between the public policy that effectively we see and the private gains that go on that we don't. Buying, selling, and partnering with each other through numerous cutouts and subsidiaries, making it difficult to pin down who owns exactly what. Now, this one is just an example. It is not the only one, and he's not the only person involved in this level. But as an example, the Gates network, it's the control of physical wealth as the example I'm going to give you. Bill Gates' father, William H. Gates Sr., was the legal and corporate end of the founding partner for Preston Gates and Ellis LLP. It's currently known as K&L Gates. He was also a board member of Costco Wholesale. Bill Gates' mother on the financial side of it, was a board member for First Interstate Bank System and United Way International. And her connections to IBM allowed for Microsoft's early startup deal that basically Microsoft and Bill Gates became who they were. And the policies of influence that they have, such as on the regents for the University of Washington, because he was based out of Seattle, influenced over the regional technology and health policies within that system. Later, as Bill Gates basically acquired more wealth and more connections, Bill Gates by himself and then the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as Cascade Investment, became the new thing, became the new front face. Now, with biotech research and vaccines, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a major funder for Gavi and CEPI, their influential global health policies and vaccine distribution through their partnerships with Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and BioNTech. In the food and agricultural area, the Cascade Investment Group is the largest private owner of U.S. farmland, and they control scarce physical lands. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds agritech research to control future crop varieties and livestock. And then with energy involved with climate change, the founder of Breakthrough Energy, a direct investment in the next generation of energy infrastructure. So you start to see that, yes, technically it is one person involved in multiple companies that are running each their own individual programs, but those programs each benefit each other and are connected to each other. Now, to expand from that, we will go to a well-known organized syndicate referred to as the PayPal Mafia. And a lot of people don't know, and there's a long list of those that are involved in it, but I'm going to just name effectively the top 3 that most people will know by name or by the company. Now, with the PayPal Mafia, it's about maintaining control of the digital wealth. Now, the interlocking technological aspect here, this group controls the foundational platforms for future automation, surveillance, and digital communications. So just think about that. Future automation, surveillance, digital communication. Now, this is effectively a very brief list. There's actually, I believe, at least a total of 11 people that were part of the PayPal Mafia. Some of them are still active in the companies that they're a part of. Some of them have moved on to make other partnerships, but they've basically found it and they control the industry through these various networks. Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, X, formerly Twitter, global connectivity through Starlink and SpaceX. He has the satellites and the rockets to put them up there. Future transportation and AI through Tesla, the automated self-driving cars. Human-computer interface through Neuralink. And then digital information and the control of the narrative through X. Peter Thiel, Palantir Technologies. Now that's an important name to remember. The Founders Fund. He was the major first investor, the first big money investor in Facebook, now called Meta, which is effectively data surveillance and government intelligence by Palantir, because that's how Palantir got started. They created intelligence gathering software post 9/11 for the government to basically minority report in a high percentage actions and activities that would go on based upon communication, internet, and other digital information to spot the pattern and then isolate it and predict the most logical outcome that could occur next. Venture capital is the founder fund's dictate for future technologies, and it receives funding from them. So effectively, you've got a company that its only job is to pick and choose what could be the next big thing technologically wise and dump money into it, supporting whoever it is and getting them up and running, and of course maintaining a level of control. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn. That's one that you should know right off the top. Greylock Partners and Afflection AI. Now you have the human capital and the professional network. You're managing and controlling the people assets of it. So you've got the actual brains that you need and you can effectively see where people are shifting, migrating to. You've got an entire LinkedIn profile. The computers are looking and analyzing at everything, seeing who is of value and who is of no value. So through LinkedIn, it controls the professional data. AI development is influencing the nature of the future of automated labor. Yes, right now there are still dozens of jobs through the Department of Labor that are not automated, and there are still going to be several jobs that won't immediately be automated. But the problem is when the automation on the other end, both with the intellectual AI, letting AI plan the logistics and do the administration of it, basically setting the schedule and the tone, developing the robotics to handle certain aspects of physical labor, you reduce the amount of actual manual labor an individual needs to do, and therefore you can reduce the number of individuals that need to do that job. So the job would still exist, but now you need fewer and fewer people to do the job. So that right off the top eliminates a large portion of people. There are certain things that won't immediately translate into a robot handling it or AI exclusively handling it, but there will be multiple jobs that you'll find that if your office or your work department had 30 people, in 5 years it may have 15. In 2 years after that, it may be 3. Because everything has been streamlined to the point where you only need 3, basically 1 per shift, as it were, if it were a shift type function to get the job done. Now, again, these are not the only members, and not by themselves individually are they controlling all the plans and actions independently. They're all still working together. They don't specifically have to have a meeting on Tuesday at the Regency Hotel to discuss things. They can continue to do the individual business functions that they do, but they're all aware of it. So even if one investor makes a slight bad investment or makes a bad call, or something else outside of their control changes their profit margin, the other companies can adjust and adapt to that. So it's not going to stop the role of the process, as it were. Now, they share control points, which are their joint investments. This is the link that establishes them in that complementary cross-industry financial security. It ensures the mutual benefit. So none of them are doing anything directly to undermine the other person. Even if you look at it and you think, oh, well, that's going to cut into that guy's profit because he bought this company. No, he may have bought a company and has control of it, and you may see a slight shift in the financial capital gained by another competitor, but they're not really competing against each other. It's just moving things from one end of the scale to the other, but it still balances out. Now, breakthrough energy, actually, almost skipped a part. So there are shared companies or initiatives in the industry for control. Breakthrough Energy is a climate tech and energy infrastructure. Gates is the founder. Reid Hoffman is a prominent investor. Lightsail Energy is energy storage. Bill Gates and Peter Thiel are both primary backers of this. Change.org is a digital platform for social advocacy. Again, Bill Gates and Reid Hoffman were both key investors. Microsoft and LinkedIn, business technology and professional data. Bill Gates' company, Microsoft, acquired Hoffman's company, LinkedIn, cementing control over the professional workforce data. So again, even though it was bought out by another part of the investment, another link in the chain. And with the final wealth conversion for all of these players, and it's a large, wide blanket. There are many other people under the covers. But the ultimate goal is not to have billions of dollars sitting in a vault underneath a ruined world, but it's to leverage those billions of dollars right now, again, in the present, to control the necessary elements for continued dominance. Land, agricultural production, data storage, energy systems, and biotech development. Because you have to think about it. The billions of dollars that it takes to design, plan, and build these huge data centers that you have to admit, they are popping up exponentially fast all over the country. If you went back 5 years ago, there were data centers. You go back 5 years before that, there were data centers. But just in these last 5 years, you could probably find, simple Google search, how many data centers have been built anywhere in the US, average number. And you'll see it's a significantly large amount. So that's a lot of money, a lot of investment putting into it. Why would they invest that type of money into these structures if effectively an asteroid was going to hit the Earth and wipe everything out, or that there was going to be an alien invasion, or the super volcano erupts, or anything else that would destroy? Now, it's not to say that there won't be natural disasters. It's not to say that there won't be levels of construction. But it's also looking at the fact that when you do have some level of destruction, if you've got a backup and a backup and a backup to your backup times 10 spread out all across the world, it doesn't matter that you lose 5 data centers around the New Madrid fault line over in Tennessee. You've got 15 around the area that can pick up the slack. So they're not investing in these things to simply write them off as an insurance loss, because again, if the world ends, you're not going to have Allstate coming to your door to take photographs and write up your assessment for your check. That's not going to be a thing. They're doing it because they know at a certain point the system will collapse. And when it does and it resets, segue into the Great Reset, they will have a totally isolated and controlled system with all the information that they need and all of the metrics plugged in. And then it's a matter of seeing who lines up at the door, who's hanging out in their little encampment, and who they have to send the drones out for. Because at this point in time, if you're a threat and they simply don't want you interfering in their operation, you've got aerial drones, you've got land drones, you've got AI-controlled cruise missiles. It may seem excessive and it may sound ridiculous, but we have in our current time, in the 20th and in the 21st century, simply used drones and cruise missiles to eliminate 1 or 2 people when we found them. Oh, that's the person, that's the threat, let's get rid of them now. So it won't be an issue in this very near future that if they're looking to control the remaining population, get everyone in line, fall in order, and you're an outlier, you're a problem, to just simply remote control, hit a button, and then within the next 5 minutes, maybe you might hear something, maybe you might not, you're gone. That's the end of that. Now, with that, you have a total synergy where everything comes together, as I've been leading up to. So you have the Gates Foundation controlling the physical assets, the food, the vaccines, the energy production, the members of the PayPal mafia controlling the digital and the technical assets through AI, both in digital platform as well as in robotics and automation, and total surveillance systems. That's physical surveillance, medical, logistic, financial, and the communication infrastructure that ties it all together, all the means and methods and modes of moving information and data around, interlocking into a structure that ensures that the elite have control over both the physical and the digital means of survival and governance in the post-apocalyptic era. This enabling of the policies and punishments to be effective across multiple spectrums. So if you're in the game, you're going to play by the rules, because if you get put on the bench or ejected from it, it's not going to be a good time for you. Now, with the tax the rich mantra, that will affect people. That will only affect some of the people. There are a lot of rich people, a lot of wealthy people, but if they're not part of that elite untouchable circle, they're the ones that are going to be paying the extra. So yes, the rich people that buy the fancy boat, that new Bugatti, or wear that custom-made Bulova, they're going to pay their fair share. No doubt about it. They're going to pay their fair share, and they're going to complain about it. And, you'll have a whole group of people cheering and hoorah, they're paying their fair share. But meanwhile, the true titans of wealth, whatever they pay goes to the government. Then the government puts it back into circulation through subsidies for a project that the titans themselves control, because the politicians that they have influence over change the policies to benefit them on the behalf of the lobby groups and the pundits. So that money that it's out there, it doesn't come to you or I. That level of, tax the rich, that money does not come to you or I. It just takes a walk right around the mall. If you've been to Washington, D.C., or you've seen photos of it, you look at the National Mall. That's all the money does. It goes right around the mall, and it comes right back into the pocket of that level of elite that it just came out of. So we will never see the benefit on any level of that type of rich. We'll see the benefits on the level of someone who makes $10 million a year. We'll see that on some, celebrity football player or some rapper, or we'll see that on some low-end commercial real estate investor that, owns several condos down in Boca Raton. But we're not going to see it on the level of the people that we just mentioned. That money goes out, it passes through a dozen hands, and then it comes right back to them, maybe minus a 1% handling charge service fee that I'm sure many of the politicians, through their nonprofit organizations that they have, gets contributed into their campaign fund so that they can get reelected the next term, because they're going to fight even harder for you to get the money that you deserve from those fat cat millionaires and billionaires. So the current emphasis on making more money by the elite is simply the necessary action of converting the currency into capital before that currency's value and the current system that supports it is intentionally discarded. It is, for the most part, within the tiers of their power, strictly about gaining and maintaining control of the world that they are creating for themselves. Boats, Bulova watches, Bugattis, they're all meaningless collectibles. These titans walk the earth without concern for the peasants beneath their feet. And well, that's all I've got for you, and I'll catch you in the next one.